So we've already unplugged the fan motor. We've got the ESC unstuck because it was stuck on the tape, and we've got the cover for the radio out, and all the wires are disconnected from
That's really wet.
the receiver. Okay, and yeah, it's dripping all over me. And it's whether you can tell.
Dang. It's urinating on me.
Which is why we're replacing the non-waterproof electronic speed control. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to find our driver. We're going to remove the motor by taking out several screws. Take a video, move your video up here so you can see. Taking out several screws so that we can get it out. And pause.
Where is it?
Right there. It's always a good idea when you're dealing with RC cars to have a magnet because your screws are very vital. The magnet holds the screws so they don't get lost. So when you pull a screw out, if it comes out, when it comes out.
No, I think it's more of an if. Sometimes.
Sometimes. Get out of there, screw. You can put it on the magnet and it'll always be there.
Forever.
So when it's time for reassembly, then you can have all your screws. Pause. Are you rolling? Okay. So we're removing the motor. When it cooperates, this is the cooling fan on the motor. We need to remove these wires so that we can put the new speed controller on. And that'll be really loud on the video. Pause. As soon as we remove the water that the tire peed all over my work surface here, we now have the components that need to be removed. The 15-turn engine, super high speed. The non-waterproof driven in the water speed controller, oops. And the on and off switch, which is going away because we have a new one. What we're going to be doing is installing the new waterproof electronic speed controller with a new
time it's waterproof.
Power switch and new cables, and it is completely and totally programmable for either mode that you want to use it for, be it crawling or high speed. We're using it for crawling because anybody can go back and forth on the street and get bored. Crawling is playing chess with the rocks. Pause. Okay, I don't have a soldering jig, so I have to make my own stuff up, and a rubber band and a pair of needle nose and a box. That's it. Now with the soldering iron, we start with the motor wires. We have to heat this spot right here where each wire goes into this board. Now this is a electronic control board, so you have to be real careful with that if you're putting it back into something. This one is damaged, so we won't be putting it back in, so we don't really care about it. But for this little film we're doing right here, we're going to do it the right way so you can see how to do it the right way first. And we just take the tip of the soldering iron and stick it right on there until it starts heating up. And while that's happening, you pull the wire and it comes right out. Now notice the wire won't come out at all for any reason until you heat the solder. You can see a little bit of puff of smoke there. Once you heat the solder, the wire pops right out. And we set our engine off to the side. Very hot. Don't grab it like this. It will burn the snot out of you.
You will die. You won't die, but you will be very much in pain.
Okay, now we're going to do the very same thing for the battery wires, because on the new ESC, which I stuck right here, it has a different style battery connector than what's on my batteries. Can you see these? Than what's on my batteries. I have the T connectors. The new ESC came with this one. So we'll be removing this and soldering it in, soldering this lead into here. It'll be that, no, probably not that long. That's a lot to wad up inside the truck.
Yeah.
Okay, so back to the soldering iron. You can see a different approach from it here. Basically, I'm using this finger to hold the work and pulling with these two fingers here. At the same time, I'm applying the heat to the ESC. And sometimes it comes right off and sometimes it doesn't. Get out of there. It's always a good idea to have a soldering jig, and that's why. Just see the big burn mark?
Oh yeah.
That's because I let the soldering gun touch the plastic, which you can smell.
That was very
Enlightening.
dramatic.
It was meant to be. Come on out of there. Can you see what I'm doing
Yeah.
on the video?
Yeah, it looks like you're just melting off the metal completely.
There it goes.
Finally. That was a pain. That looked like a pain, but I wouldn't know. How hot do you think that thing is?
How hot is it?
Yeah. I'd call that pretty hot.
And it's hot enough to melt metal.
Oh yeah.
Solder is a very soft metal, but it's still a metal.
Yeah.
Sometimes you got to hold your mouth just right. To get it to come loose.
Okay.
I'm just putting solder onto the new wires of the new ESC. You want to make sure that it goes into the wire, not just a ball on top of it. Otherwise you don't get a good connection, and that'll cause problems with your running. See how it just went right in right there? That's what you're looking for.
I'm going to bed. Your phone was over there, and I just I plugged it in for you.
Cool, thank you, darling. All the wires soldered up that we need to get wired, soldered up. We're going to apply the heat shrink. You want to put this down far enough. You don't want it close to your work because the heat from the soldering gun will actually cause the heat shrink to the wire. So you want to have just a small section of heat shrink, just enough to cover your work. That's plenty. And you just slide it down the wire to the end, out of the way, so that later you can use it to
Connect them.
cover your connection so that water and stuff like that doesn't bother it. Okay. For protection of your connection. Pause. At this point, the most difficult part is getting the two wires soldered together to where they look halfway decent. This is what we're going to try to attempt to do now. Cross the two wires and put the soldering iron on top, and with any amount of luck, all the solder melts together in one spot.
What if there's low luck? What would happen?
It takes a while, obviously, for the solder to get hot in such a large area. But as you can see, it's trying. You gotta be gentle with it and blow off blow it off, cool it off with your breath, and then pull on it. See, it didn't melt together correctly. So we got to go at it again. Pause. So once you get your connection made, that's when you take your heat shrink and slide it down over the wires. And you can use a heat gun, but I just use a regular lighter. You got to use this part of the flame, not that part. That part will burn it, this part just melts it. And you kind of walk it back and forth like this. And it shrinks right down over the wire and makes a nice strong connection. Pause.
Wow, I always cough at the beginning of each one.
These are the battery connections. Now that they've been made together, they're good and strong, not going anywhere. On the new ESC. Now we have to do the motor connections. According to the manual, it doesn't matter which way you put the motor on, which ones you put them on. It matters to me because I like it to go forward when I push the trigger to go forward. Pause. Rather than soldering it like this, I don't like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to heat this section up here, pull these wires off, and solder these wires right to the motor. That way I've got less resistance in the motor, it'll run cooler. Pause. Alright, we removed the old wires off the motor and now we're going to attempt to put the new wires on the motor. If we can do it without it rolling around. Stand by. Now if I could just hold it in place at the right time.
Do you want me to get closer?
No. Come on, baby. There it goes. The problem, you know what? I need to do this like this. I just remembered the angle of the motor on the body is weird.
I almost paused it. That was close.
One side down, now the other side.
Do you want me to pause?
Nope.
Random bit of coughing.
Nope. Didn't take. Pause. Okay, so this is very hot. Fortunately, I didn't touch it. I just felt the heat. This is the engine with the heat shrink soldered to the ESC. This is the battery lead soldered to the ESC right here. And now it's ready to install into the truck. Pause. Okay, so what we've done here is we've hooked it up outside of mounting to make sure that everything works before we bother putting it all together. What we've got is our transmitter, which takes the signal from the radio to the transmitter and gives that through this wire into the ESC, which is the electronic speed control. And this is just the on and off switch, no big deal. Okay, and over here is the battery that we've got hooked up for testing. And if you shoot the motor, you can see, if you shoot the motor, you watch the gear, you can see it works quite well. It actually has a lot of high torque. And will dance all over the place if you let it get away from you. So we're happy with the ESC. And the fact that the old one, if we had run that, would have been too hot to touch. This one, no temperature at all. No, watch. No temperature. No hot. It's not hot at all. Pause. And after everything is said and done, a little red. Let's see if the engine starts. Sounds like it's starting.
You start the engine.
The ESC is not programmed as of yet, so that's why you're getting little glitches with sounds and stuff like that. But once we get it all programmed, all that'll be out of there, and she'll be a little barking dog. Hear that beep? Move that chair back.
Now this car is not generally meant for indoors. We're just testing it out. And the true mascot of the video, Rusty.
When I punch it, it stalls it. So there's got to be some adjustment going on there. Hear the beep?
Yeah.
We don't want that to do that every time.
Rusty, look at him. He just looks so like abused, even though he's definitely not abused.
Typically on an RC, you hear that it sounds like it's slamming on the brakes. Typically on an RC, you hit reverse for braking. On a crawler, all you got to do is let go of the throttle and it automatically brakes. Well, that's why you hear the screeching when you go into reverse, is because it's supposed to be braking, but it's not. It's actually going into reverse. Like that. All right, that's it. Thanks.